everyone, it's SamHunny here, and I kind of want to do a tiny mini rant. It may go on for a little while, so it may not be that tiny now that I think about it, because I tend to ramble, as I'm doing right now. So, if you're unaware, or if you just don't know, there's kind of a big politically correct movement going on through the world, not just America. Things that encompass, like, this big new wave of feminist culture where they want equal rights for women and they want to fill the wage gap and they want to get more diversity in certain jobs. There's the Black Lives Matter, where they're saying that there's lots of people still, really prejudiced about blacks, that basically the whole world's racist. And then there's like some other stuff. I could really go on a list all day about the kind of political correctness that we're seeing today. I really just want to focus on the feminism aspect, the third wave feminism. I say third wave because there's a weird divide of feminism. And I don't want to go into detail explaining it right now because it'll kind of get really complicated. But I will just refer to them as feminists, even though that word covers a broad spectrum of women that think things differently. That's like saying all Americans like hamburgers. That may not necessarily be true, but for the sake of this explanation, I'm just going to say feminists in a general way. So, feminists want equality for women. They want to fill in a wage gap, which is the difference between the amount of money that a woman makes and the amount of money a man makes. We can add skin color in there because there's a notable difference between the amount of money a white male makes and the amount of money an Asian man makes. So I'll just leave it like just men and women. So there is a difference. And one of the other things is that women aren't in a lot of, high paying jobs. Like, there's a lot of women teachers, for example, and as we all know, teachers get pretty harshly screwed over. That's not to say that there aren't men teachers, because a lot of my teachers are actually male. But I'm just, throwing that out there as an example. So, this all revolves around a topic of something that I read about that happened at GDC. If you don't know what GDC is, it is the Game Developers Conference, which is kind of a big deal if you're going into development or design for gaming, or if you're a gamer that wants to know the news before everybody else. You usually pay attention to the GDC because game developers and CEOs and companies do this as their big shot to share their knowledge. It's kind of like a scholarly conference about video games, and it's pretty freaking cool. So there is this one topic that was covered on Gamma Sutra, which is another pretty important place to go to if you're interested in game development. So on Gamma Sutra, there's an article called Women in VR Talk Business and Diversity in a Burgundian Tech Industry. I don't know what that word is, but I'll probably write it up on screen or something. And it is a pretty neutral report on a panel done by four women who I presume are all feminists by the way that they describe themselves. So we have Helen Situ, I think. If they happen to watch this, I apologize for butchering your name. I don't really think they will, but I feel like I should apologize because I do not think I'm pronouncing their names correctly. So Helen Situ, Nani de la Pena, Christina Catano, and Shauna Heller. So these four women had a panel where they were talking about the virtual reality industry and the effects and opportunities that it have. And they actually went into some really, really good points. Like, they were saying how it can really affect and grow education, where it can increase engagement and so on and so forth. But at kind of the end, it became a very feminist sounding, what do you call it? It's like when you ask for something, but you don't ask for what you actually want. It's like, can I have a pizza? Well, what do you want on your pizza? I don't really care, any kind of pizza. That kind of thing. Where they say that the VR industry is not well diverse and it does not have a lot of women in it. And what they would like to see is that women going into these jobs so that it's more equally diverse. This goes over into what I mentioned earlier about both the wage gap and the women in diverse jobs. So how it works with the wage gap and the diverse jobs is that women and men are psychologically and sociologically, is that an adjective? Sociology, like, also, whatever, in society and in their mental minds, women and men differentiate. There are some layovers, as there is with any kind of situation, but for the most part, they're separate genders, not just because of their bodies, but also because of their mentalities and their goals. Women tend to focus jobs like doctors or teachers, so I've heard, even though there's lots of men in there. They do things that are more nurturing. And then men go into usually more physically demanding jobs, where it be that they have really long hours, like they're in a corporate office and they have to work basically 24/7. Or they could be construction workers, where there's not a lot of women in that area, like something physically demanding. And it's not to say women can't do those jobs and men can't do the other, because we've seen it happen. It does happen. The wage gap is a representation of the choices that these individual genders make in their job. The gender gap took into consideration all women and all of their professions and their hours. So, like, I heard somewhere that women tend to work less hours than men because they wanted more free time for themselves. And I could use that as a representation of me. I like having lots of free time. But women tend to work less hours. They tend to work less demanding jobs. They tend to work less than men. Men tend to work more risky jobs. They tend to work a little longer because they really throw themselves in there. It's like the men being the breadwinner or something. Like, they feel like they have to prove themselves. So that's where the wage gap comes in. It's taking all jobs across both genders in a study and not considering if one woman has the same hours as another man. Like, if they narrowed the wage gap search, like if they put one woman and one man in the exact same position, they work the exact same hours, and they put in the exact same effort doing the exact same thing, and the balance in pay was still different, yeah, I'll give you the wage gap. But that's not how the wage gap is being portrayed. It is very broad spectrum, because the wage gap represents the different choices people make, not necessarily how society treats them differently. So, and then the diversity is another example of that. Lots of feminists want women to enter science and enter math careers and enter things that are predominantly male, which isn't a problem at all if those women want to go there. So the problem with diversity is that feminists want to encourage women to enter fields that they are not interested in. The reason why women don't enter those fields is not because they're predominantly male, it's because the women have no interest in going there. So one thing that came to mind was that a lot of feminists, not these particular women, because obviously they've well spent their time in virtual reality, I don't mean like they've disconnected. I mean like they're studying VR, they're doing things that they want to do. They're studying things that they really like. Other feminists, a lot of other feminists, have focused on careers in two particular what are they called? Degrees, which generally fall into liberal arts and gender studies. These two degrees don't really offer anything to these fields that feminists want to encourage women to enter, because they're not particularly science heavy, they're particularly nurturing, like all the other jobs that women usually tend to favor. Except for liberal arts. I think liberal arts is just another way to say general degree, because just about anybody can get a liberal arts and not use it for anything. It's very much just a broad degree. It's like going to the next level of schooling, but not focusing on anything. So lots of feminists go into one of these two degrees, and then they come out saying that, well, there's not a lot of diversity of women in the science and math fields. We want to encourage women to go in there. My question for those feminists is, why didn't you go into that field? It's probably because you didn't want to. That's why I feel that the diversity argument is really unfair, because when feminists ask that women go into a science field, they're not saying they want to see more women able to feel comfortable in a science field. They're saying we want to force women to take these jobs to make it seem like there's more diversity without, really caring what the person taking that job really wants. That's how I take it, because it's the only way that you can answer that. The only way to fill a diversity within a field that is not predominantly women is to force people to take that job that don't want to. And I think that's really unfair. There's lots of women in game design or development. I mean, it's still predominantly male, but that's just because a lot of women don't want to go into game design. They want to focus on other things, like usually more traditional jobs like being a doctor or being a school teacher or being a gender studies major. So that's just my question for feminists. Why didn't you go into this field if you want other women to do that? Why do you expect other women to want to go into these fields that you yourself did not go into? It's not because the women are not encouraged to, because I would like to think that if a woman wants to do something, she doesn't need the permission from another woman or the encouragement from another woman to do it. I mean, humans as a whole, sometimes need a little push now and then to go and do something. But to say that a woman can't pursue her own career goals just because it's filled with men that aren't necessarily even forcing her down. I would also like to counter argue that in these predominantly male heavy fields such as science and corporate office and stuff like that, the hiring squad, I don't know what they're called, the hiring committee generally favor women for the sole purpose or the sole reason because there are not a lot of women in those fields. For example, I am fully aware that I have a gendered privilege being a girl, that if I were going to go into a game design job, I have a higher chance of getting that job because I'm a girl over a guy who is maybe equally as passionate and intelligent and creative as I am, because that is not a male dominant field. It looks better to have a girl. So what these feminists are encouraging by wanting to create diversity is they're encouraging this sexist idea that companies should hire girls because they're girls, not because they're qualified, not because they're better, just because they're girls. I kind of want this to be put into focus so that maybe it'd be something that you realize. Like if someone comes to you about the wage gap, if someone comes to you about the diversity of women, it's not the feminist choice if women want to go into that field. It's the women's choice. And if they really want to go there, they don't need the encouragement. So I really wish the feminists would kind of back off and stop being so sexist themselves by assuming that women can't make their own decisions to go into a field that they really want to. I mean, they don't complain about how Asians tend to get paid more. Like, there's a wage gap between Asians and white men, and it's not even like the wage gap how it is between men and women. It's like an actual wage gap. Asians actually get paid more for the same amount of time. Maybe not the same amount of effort, because like I said, Asians may work more. But that's a racist construct that nobody's really looking into. They're only focusing on the women, even though they're already paid the same. They're already treated the same. Feminists just want women to do what men do so that men don't have to exist in the same field. And that's just not going to happen, because that's just not how the world works. So I hope this little mini rant kind of made sense, and I hope that it didn't really confuse you. I encourage you to share your opinion with me in the comments below. So if you would like to ask a question, or if you would like to add your 2 cents or disagree with me, go ahead and do that. I would be happy to read your comment and respond to you. So I hope this video wasn't particularly boring. It was kind of long, and I hope maybe it incited you a little bit. So thank you very much for putting up with my rant, and I'll see you pretty soon for some new gameplay.